Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I have a question and a comment. It seems to me that this attitude of people towards the government of do something has changed since the end of the Second World War, in the US especially since the Johnson administration, but it has changed throughout the world, and I think in this way, in some ways, the communist ideology has made a much bigger dent in the West than we give it credit, and that is virtually no one now doubts that it's a government business to protect us from disease. And in fact, to make us live as long as possible, of which the epitome is, there are two things which are especially striking. You may not be aware of the fact that if you want to commit suicide and tell this to somebody, for that you get locked up and potentially locked up forever, like a murderer. Now this is an interesting phenomenon about which I have written, because this is not a religious country formally. And the only basis for prohibiting suicide is in religion. So this is completely contrary to so-called separation of church and state. And secondly, if you ask yourself the question, apropos prohibition, of in what way are you in this audience or anybody out there threatened by peasants in Afghanistan growing opium? Now, how is this the American government's business? Now, no, I mean, this is an outrageous question in any normal audience.
The drug war, to which Tom alludes in the last part of his comment, is a very nice example of how government uses alleged crisis. We've had a series of alleged drug crises in the past 40 or 50 years in this country. You know, we've run through everything from reefer madness to crack cocaine epidemics, in which supposedly people were going insane from using the latest version of cocaine, and it's one after another. You know, if you can stand to watch the news, there's a fright du jour. And then there are recurrent frights, you know, like drug frights that come back in a little different form from the last time. But their import, their significance is that they frighten a lot of ordinary people and make them think, oh my goodness, my child is at risk. He could go crazy taking drugs, or he could commit a crime, or he could be harmed by drug dealers. You know, we've got to shut this down. Now, this is all fake, practically from A to Z. But a great many people get something out of this. Okay? The drug war is always said to be a failure because people keep using drugs. But I maintain that the drug war is a tremendous success, because on the basis of a collection of fraudulent claims, millions of people are doing very well for themselves. The government officials who get themselves elected by ranting about shutting down the drug trade, the whole bureaucracy of enforcing the drug laws, in which people working for the DEA and other police agencies get paid very good salaries to go around pretending to attack drug dealers. The armed forces have been dragged into this. The U.S. Coast Guard, a service in which I once served, I'm sorry to say, has been made into a drug warrior. And the other armed forces are involved as well. And it's used even all over the world, even to the backwoods of Afghanistan, of all places, to help prop up U.S. foreign policy in various ways. And it's been immensely destructive, but large numbers of people in the government and its bureaucracy have benefited from carrying on this so-called drug trade. And I guess I don't have to explain to you, this presents enormous opportunities for corruption, bribery, cooperation between drug dealers and police, as well as a lot of crime that's committed by these drug warriors who periodically burst into someone's house and shoot them to death, purportedly enforcing drug laws.
All right. I'd like to ask your comment on the following. I would extend what you have just said to the observation that the war on drugs has become not a government policy, but indeed the establishment of a national religion, which has been forced off on as much of the rest of the world as we have been able to ram down its throats. It has become the policy of a succession of American governments, and in fact, I would argue that the two Bush administrations and the intervening Clinton administration are, in effect, essentially one administration. But to continue on, the policy of the U.S. State Department is to obtain binding international agreements from all foreign governments willing to accept American aid or have it cut off if they don't cooperate, that they adopt our national religion as their national religion. And it is when you use this analysis that you can begin to obtain some traction in beginning to bring down this suicidal philosophy that, as you mentioned, pays off as many people as did the Spanish Inquisition in its day.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your comment. I agree with just about everything you said. I mean, I might put a little different spin on a few parts of it, but basically I think that's correct. I had an article in my journal 2 or 3 years ago about these international agreements that the United States has, as you say, rammed down the throats of all the other parties that signed them, and there are, I think, now over 100 countries that have been forced to join forces with the U.S. in this so-called drug war, and it's been hugely destructive in Colombia, especially. It's done a world of damage to millions of people there, and it's a real tragedy. By describing it as a religion, I think you're getting close to what I was saying about how masses of ordinary Americans have been won over to support this by fear and by the idea that the government's available to be a savior. As you know, religions have their saviors. In this case, the U.S. government is to save us from all these alleged threats that the drug dealers pose. But again, until people can begin to open their eyes and perceive the fraudulence of this drug war, I think it's going to continue to have great political appeal.
Fuck the media, fuck the banks, fuck drone strikes, fuck tanks, fuck hunger, fuck war, fuck ignoring of the poor, fuck the left, fuck the right, fuck the government. Fuck people who call people conspiracy theorists. Fuck those who say we gotta find and kill the terrorists. Fuck celebrities who do credit card commercials. Man, when is enough enough, you greedy, selfish, soulless fucks? I'm looking at you, Samuel L. Jackson. You too, Jennifer Garner. Fuck you! Seriously though, for reals, for reals, for real. Fuck the fucking government. There it is.